Contexto, metodologías, debates y manifestaciones situadas en el arte contemporáneo. Es un ciclo que fue pensado en el contexto de la diplomatura en arte contemporáneo de la Escuela de Arte y Patrimonio de la UNSAM, que dirigimos juntos con Florencia Levy. El objetivo de este ciclo es compartir un contexto de discusión sobre la investigación artística como una práctica consciente de su esfera, impulsada por la experimentación, la reflexión y el análisis, en donde se desarman los límites entre práctica, pensamiento, escritura e intercambio. Hoy en esta tercera charla nos acompaña Natasha Kelly. Hace 2 lunes estuvo Nicolás Testoni de Bahía Blanca, el lunes pasado estuvo Feda Baeza de Buenos Aires y hoy, como les decía, Natasha Kelly. Cada una de ellas nos compartirá desde su propia práctica como artistas, teóricos y gestores algunos enfoques posibles para abordar procesos discursivos y no discursivos que desafían las formas institucionalizadas de producción de conocimiento.
Bien, Natasha Kelly es doctora en Sociología y Ciencias de la Comunicación, es autora y editora de 6 libros, curadora y artista. Sus instalaciones se exhibieron en diversos museos de Alemania y tuvo su debut cinematográfico en la 10ª Bienal de Berlín en 2018. Con su premiado documental Millie's Awakening, que se proyectó también en Estados Unidos, Brasil, Australia, India y Europa. Como residente del Instituto Goethe, pasó 2 meses en Salvador de Bahía, Brasil, en 2019 y debutó como directora de teatro con la adaptación de su disertación Afroculture, The Space Between Yesterday and Tomorrow. Posteriormente la pieza se presentó en Estados Unidos en el 2020 y en Alemania este año. Publicó The Comet, Afrofuturism 2.0 y curó un simposio con el mismo nombre en el HAU Theater de Berlín. Acaba de publicar hace pocos meses su último libro que se llama Racismus, los problemas estructurales necesitan soluciones estructurales. Kelly dirige el ciclo de teatro M.A. and Sisters, que se presenta anualmente en el Hebel am Ufer Theater en Berlín desde 2015. Bueno, como Natasha no habla español y la traducción simultánea por Zoom es un poco complicada, ella grabó su presentación para que nosotros podamos subtitular al español, pero ella va a estar en vivo al terminar el video con una traductora para responder todas las preguntas y comentarios que ustedes tengan y abrir el diálogo como hicimos en las otras 2 charlas pasadas. Bueno, esperemos disfruten la presentación y les agradecemos a todos por estar acá.
La presentación dura unos 35 minutos, luego mostraremos un fragmento de una obra de Natasha y luego abrimos el diálogo, así que lo disfruten.
Hello, my name is Natasha A. Kelly. I am an author, an artist, a filmmaker, theatre director, and presently visiting professor at the University of Rhode Island in New England, the USA. First of all, I want to thank you very much for the invitation and for allowing me to speak to you this way virtually, and I'm also looking forward to the Q&A where I will be, well, virtually live afterwards. I thought that first of all it would be important to talk to you about some of the books that I have published, because these books have actually led to theatre performances, for example, and I adapted, for example, my dissertation. I studied communication studies and sociology at the University of Münster in Germany, and my dissertation, Afrokultur, which in Germany we have to publish in order to get our PhD certificate. At that time, this is nearly 5 years ago, I think I was a bit ahead of the political debate, because since Black Lives Matter last year, people are just slowly starting to talk about Afro culture, Afrokultur, which was actually the title of my book. And in this, I look at the biographies of W.E.B. Du Bois, Audrey Lord, and Mai Ayim, Maya Yim was an Afro-German poetess and one of the founders of the Black German movement. I'm not sure if you are familiar with her. W.E.B. Du Bois was a African-American scholar, activist, and he studied in Germany during German colonialism. And Audrey Lord, the US-American poet that some of you might be familiar with. So these three individuals were very influential in creating Black knowledge or producing Black knowledge in a German context, and also in analyzing racism in Germany. So in my dissertation, I actually look at how these three produce a continuity of Black German knowledge and show why this knowledge has not yet reached German mainstream or curricula, be it school curricula or universities. And during the time when I was writing this, nobody was really interested in the topic. It's a very theoretical book because it's obviously my dissertation. So I decided in 2019 to adapt it and to make it into a theatre performance, which I did. And in the theatre performance, which is also titled Afro Culture or Afro Kultur, is a conversation of these three. They meet somewhere between space and time and talk about their experiences, their time in Germany, and also their analysis of racism, and also their visions of future, their past visions of future. And this piece I put on stage in Brazil for the first time. So the world premiere was actually in Portuguese. I had it translated in Portuguese and worked with Afro-Brazilian actors. For me, it was important to actually show that Afro-Germany is part of the diaspora, and to look where our connections are, but also where our differences are. And I worked with an Afro-Brazilian percussionist who created the atmosphere of the piece in Brazil, and it worked really, really well. That I put on the same piece in the USA in 2020. This was before COVID broke out. But there, obviously it was in English, translated from German to English. And there I worked with an African-American singer-songwriter. So the whole atmosphere and aesthetic of the piece changed, although the text and the message were the same. And I'm looking forward to putting it on in Germany, in German. I will be working with a classic ensemble, a European classic ensemble, and we don't have a date set yet, but this is definitely one of many artistic adventures that I've undertaken as an academic, because I literally work at the intersection of theory and practice. Another theatre show that came out of my book was this one, Sisters and Souls. This came out in 2016 and was dedicated to the Afro-German poetess Maya Yim, who I mentioned. And it was her 20th death anniversary. Maya Yim committed suicide at the early age of 36. The reasons for this are not clear. It is said that one of them were, of course, the racism that she dealt with in her poems, but she was also diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and she spent different periods in psychiatric care, and one day decided to end her life by jumping off the 14th off the roof of a 14th story house in Berlin. And she for me is definitely one of my role models because of how she combined academia, art, her performances, her spoken word performances, and her lyric, and how she worked also at the intersection of art and academia. And she was a founder of the Black German movement, and together with Katharina Oguntoye, she coined the term Afro-German in the early 80s. And Afro-German has not only become a really important political marker, but also for me, it gave me an identity in my early teenage years. And I know that I was very influenced by Maya Yim, but I also know that there are several other young Black German women who were influenced by her. So when the publishing house asked me to write to do something for her 20th death anniversary, it was clear for me that I couldn't do this on my own, and that I didn't want to have another book where it is analyzes her poems and her works, but I wanted to show how the generations after Maya Yim, like the 20 years later, had been inspired by her. And that's why the book is called Inspirationen durch Maya Yim, Inspirations by Maya Yim. And when editing this first book, I really realized that there are many spoken word pieces in this book, and that they actually don't really belong in a book, because it's the performance of these pieces that really bring them alive. So I promised to myself that the book launch would be put on stage, which I did. And it was really so successful of combining theory and practice and performance on stage that the Hau Theater, the Hebel am Ufer Theater in Berlin, invited me to put on this show regularly. And instead of celebrating her death anniversary, we moved it to her birthday, and the Empowerment Theater My Sisters was created. That has been on stage once a year ever since, where we not only commemorate Maya Yim, but we actually deal with topics that she ignited so long ago. Some topics that we are still dealing with today. For example, changing street names. We had a really beautiful performance about changing street names, where the stage set had already incorporated the changed street name, and we were already in the future, and what that actually meant for the Black community in Germany. 5 years later, this year, namely, for her 25th anniversary, I was really, really happy to publish the second edition of this book, of Sisters and Souls, where an even younger generation has now shown that they are still influenced by Maya Yim, that they are still carrying these same discussions into the next level. And it was... we had a beautiful performance in August of this year, commemorating Maya Yim, celebrating ourselves, and what we have gained in the past 35 years and 25 years since Maya Yim's death. And I think if I was to compare these two editions, then I would say that the first edition was very harmonious. There was a lot of love in it, and a sort of calmness, I would say. Whereas this edition, in the course of Black Lives Matter, the authors, as young as they were really angry. They were determined, and it is really reflected in the writing. And one of the authors, I can't remember who, said, if I was to translate this into English, she says, "We are the last generation that is going to put up with this." And this is a sentence that really stuck by me with all the global Black Lives Matter movement on the way. since last year, it really is incorporated in this. So these two are examples of how I actually bring my theoretical experience, how I combine it with artistic practice, with performance, how I bring theory to the stage, and how my artistic work is really informed by theory. But I would also say that my theory is also informed by my theory also informs my artistic work. And an example of this, I would say, is The Comet. The Comet is The Comet Afrofuturism 2.0. This is a book that I edited in 2020, and it is the reader that came out of a symposium, a 3-day symposium that I curated at the Haum Hebel am Ufer Theatre, again in Berlin, which I enjoy working with this theatre. And it was also in commemoration of W.E.B. Du Bois, another one of my role models, I would definitely say. And W.E.B. Du Bois was a pioneer of Afrofuturism. What a lot of people don't know is that he actually wrote science fiction or speculative fiction and short stories. And one of the short stories that he wrote is titled The Comet. And the story is that practically a comet drops on New York, and New York is destroyed. And there is one survivor, Jim, a black man, and he survives because he is sent down to a vault in the bank to look for some missing documents. And when he comes back up from the vault, he realizes that New York has been destroyed. He's the only survivor, and he goes and looks for other people for other survivors. Yeah, and he finds Julia, a white woman. And at first, Julia doesn't want to speak to Jim because Jim is black and she's a white woman, and she's very, very racist towards him. I must add that The Comet was written in the year 1920, so we're talking about USA. We have a segregated society, we have Jim Crow laws, etc. Yeah, and Julia is, because she realizes that Jim is the only survivor, she's literally forced to talk to Jim, and they actually become friends and continue their route together, looking for other survivors. And they find Julia's father and her fiance among a mob of white men who want to lynch Jim because how dare he talk to this white woman. But then Julia intervenes and she saves his life practically, and the father and her fiance and the other men let her go. But before he departs, behind the crowd comes his wife, a black woman with a dead black baby in her arms, and that's where the story ends. It's a very sad ending, but it's a very influential or very symbolic ending, as I think, especially in an Afrofuturistic genre. I think with this ending, W.E.B. Du Bois is actually asking the question if there will be a future for black people, especially with the future of the black population being symbolized by this dead black baby. Will we even be the future is the question that we can ask ourselves here. Yeah, but he's also, as a sociologist, which he was, he's asking another question, or he's making something else very clear. And what is important to know of the year 1920 is that it was shortly after the last pandemic, known as the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu was just coming to an end, and people worldwide were forced to wear masks like we are today. And although they're in this devastating global situation, structures of racism cannot be destroyed. Even if a comet falls on the planet, falls on New York or wherever. And what Du Bois is telling us is that racism is man-made, and it needs man or woman to deconstruct it. So it's literally 100 years after this story was published that the reader of the symposium came out, which for me has another dimension also, showing, relating to time, especially from an Afrocentric perspective. Time is circular in comparison to time from a Eurocentric perspective, where time is linear. In a Eurocentric understanding of time, you have a beginning and you have the end of something, and then something else starts and then something else ends. But in an Afrocentric perspective, time is circular in the sense that there is no beginning and no ending of everything, of anything. Time always time is never ending, but also doesn't have a beginning. So this means that the past informs the present, and we need the present to inform the future. And if we're talking about future, as the term Afrofuturism already says, we can ask ourselves, are we talking about past futures, like the year 1920 and the comet, when the comet was written, or are we talking about present futures, the effect of past futures, or are we talking about future futures, so to say, the futures yet to come, which is I think an understanding that became really, really clear in this symposium and in this reader. And so the symposium was, I was really happy to be able to invite experts from the field of Afrofuturism, who are all members of the BSAM, the Black Speculative Arts Movement, which was founded in the USA, here in the USA, by Ronaldo Anderson and John Jennings in 2015, and which was a reaction of of Barack Obama being inaugurated as the first Black president. And it was a critique practically of people thinking that we had now entered a post-racial era with the USA having a Black president, which we all know is not the case, And Afrofuturism 2.0, so it's the 2.0 movement, because we extend this genre, which was formerly reduced to music and art. We extend to the philosophy, to physics, to social movements. I would even understand Black Lives Matter movement to be an Afrofuturist movement, if we think about the demand to defund the police. It has a very, very Afrofuturistic intention that forces us to imagine societies, or how society would be if police did not exist. Which societies would we have? What would society look like? And the police being the reincarnation or the incarnation or the systemic arm of people in power. I think that it is really interesting to look at this demand through an Afrofuturistic lens, no? Because if there, let me leave it at that for now, and get on to, talking about the Black Lives Matter movement last year. That actually influenced me to write another book, which is this book, Racism, Structural Problems Need Structural Solutions, also in German. And because when the Black Lives Matter movement in last year became heard of by the majority society, because the Black Lives Matter movement had been in Germany since 2014, since it actually, since its existence, or since it was founded in the USA. It also had a chapter in Germany, but this chapter hadn't gained as much attention as it did in 2020, which I also believe was due to the pandemic. A lot of people were at home, a lot of people were watching TV, and were actually witnessing how George Floyd was murdered. And but the reactions of the press, of the German press, German media, and German politics was it was appalling. I have no other way to describe it. I think there was so many misunderstanding, work that the Afro-German community had been doing for the past 35 years was totally ignored, in the sense that there was still no understanding that racism is actually structural, and that there is no space in society, in German society also, that is free from racism, and that so-called migrants did not bring racism to Germany as they entered. Racism was already there when we arrived, but racism is only ever dealt with in the context of migration and integration in Germany, which is a huge problem, or it is reduced to individual actions or intentions, and then it is belittled in the sense that people say, "Oh, I didn't mean this. This wasn't my intention of saying this, that, and other racist words." But and it was an ongoing situation in the press, in the media, that I needed to write it down. I needed to explain once again, yet again, why racism is structural. And I took 5 examples, starting with how with monuments, which was the big issue last year, because worldwide monuments were ripped down, torn down, and trying to explain the structurality behind the idea, or breaking the structures by tearing down monuments, which was totally not fully understood in Germany. I look at the education systems, starting with primary schools, but going on to higher education. It's often seen as 2 different systems, but in Germany I think it's absolutely one system, because it's at an early age kids are already segregated, so it becomes at the age of 9-10 you already know who is going to enter university or who is not, because we have such a separated school system in Germany. I look at police brutality in Germany, of course, because last summer everybody was focusing on the USA, on the case of George Floyd, but we also have very brutal cases of police brutality in Germany as well. For example, Uri Jallo, who was burnt alive, tied up in his police cell in 2005, which is over 15 years ago. We still have not got justice for this case. So it was, in this sense, also a critique of, as we say in Germany, you have to sweep in front of your own door before you tell others to sweep theirs. I don't know if that is really translatable into English or even Spanish, but it is practically, it was a critique to, really looking at what is happening in our own country, and solving the cases that are open, that we've been fighting for as a movement, as a people, under the hashtag of Black Lives Matter, under the hashtag of Uri Jallo, that was mod, and so on, for so many years. And people are still not understanding the whole systemic matrix that is behind racism. And that's what led me to writing this book, which is a very small, short book, and where I again it was my challenge to really break down this theoretical writing, so that not only academics could have access to this book, but everybody, be it shopkeeper, be it you name it, and also for young audience or young readers who were really there was so much going on social media and you name it, that for me it was important to really have the information that we have gathered in the past 30 years, that this gets out there and is not further ignored by the majority society, which actually was the case. And then this book is also a book that I edited. It's called Black Feminism, and these are translations that I edited. I was working with a different group of translators, so the concept was to actually make the intersectional theory understandable in a German context, that for one, and to reclaim it also as a Black feminist, because like many concepts in Germany, or many Black concepts, when they reach Germany, they are depoliticized, they are whitewashed, they're taken out of their context and used for whatever by whomever. And that was the case in intersectionality as well, especially in the women's movement. Intersectionality was like separated from Black feminism, which for me is not understandable. And with the choice of text, which were not available in German, I actually show that intersectionality, the history or the evolution of the intersectional theory, starting with Sojourner Truth, right up to Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term 150 years later, and Patricia Hill Collins, who actually gives examples of how to put intersectionality into action. And this book was actually really, really successful, and as a result of it, I was named Woman of the Year 2021, which I definitely was not expecting, by the German Women's Organization. It's the Federal Women's Organization. They named me Woman of the Year, which I'm very grateful and thankful for. But I wouldn't have been if these women hadn't been before me, and if I was not standing on the shoulders of these strong Black women who have actually paved the way for me to do the work that I do today, and to actually be the radical Black feminist that I am. And speaking of that, I would like to present my last project to you. This is Millie's Awakening, which was a film, and I think that must be in my career one of the biggest honors that I have had. It was to produce for a work of art for the Berlin Biennial in 2018. And I was working with film artists at the time and decided to create a film. And this film is a documentary. It's where I talk to Black women artists from Germany. The youngest is 20, the oldest is mid-60. So, and then aged from in between. And this didn't only show the continuity of the meaning of art, but also showed the continuity of Black identity and Black feminist identity in a German context, and how it is practically articulated through art. So my film consists of 8 short films, and I talk to each of these artists in their own spaces, and be it their art studios, or I went to to a art installation with one of them, where we actually saw the image of sleeping Millie. That's this picture in the background that you can see here. Sleeping Millie is a painting by Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. Ernst Ludwig Kirchner was one of the Brücke artists, and he was a colonial painter. He lived during German colonialism, and this painting is from the year 1911. And in comparison to Paul Gauguin or to Emil Nolde, who were contemporaries of Kirchner, Kirchner never traveled to the colonies. He was neither in Africa nor in the South Sea or Asia, and so we know that all of all the models and the things that he depicts, he's seen in Germany. So my question was, this is where where the title of the film came from, Millie's awakening. First of all, we have to awaken her, and these women are giving her voice because she is one of our ancestors, our big sister, if you so will. And then I asked the question, or with this project, I asked myself who Millie was and how she actually entered the studio of Kirchner, how she lived during German colonialism in the Deutsche Kaiserreich in 1911, how she got there, what was her reality. And I've been looking for her or tracing her ever since, and I'm very much looking forward to showing the results of my research during in an installation that I will be creating in the museum where she is. It's in the Kunsthalle in Bremen. They own this picture. Millie is part of their permanent exhibition, and next to the space where she stands is a small room where I will be showing my research and what I found out about her. I'm very much looking forward to that. It will be installed in April 2020. And I'm not going to say much about her now because this is still work in progress. But for me, it's become one of my life challenges, I would say, to actually find her, to recreate her story, and maybe one day I will reenact her story as be it as a film or as a theater performance. Who knows? I hope to see you then, and enjoy. Bye bye.
Bueno, les pedimos 30 segundos, que ahora vamos a poner un video que dura 3 minutos, que es un pequeño avance de esta película de la que recién habló Natasha, Millie's Awakening. Y bueno, ahora en un segundo ya está, y luego vamos a preguntas y respuestas. Si van teniendo algún comentario o alguna pregunta, la pueden ir poniendo en el chat, que ahora cuando terminamos de ver el avance las vamos a compartir. Gracias.
Die schwarze Frau als eins der niedrigsten Glieder der Kette, als Stahlbolzen für die Emotionen aller Menschen um sie herum, von schwarzen Cis-Männern, von weißen Cis-Frauen, von weißen Cis-Männern, von weißen Menschen jenseits unserer Idee von Mann und Frau, von unseren Freundinnen of Color. Sie ist alles, trägt alles, kann alles. Für dich und all deine Bedürfnisse.
Ich kann mich ganz genau erinnern, ich glaube, ich war 16, 17, hatte ich einen Freund. so ein Liebhaber. Und der hat hier in den Werkstätten in Sanssouci gearbeitet, also in den Steinmetz-Werkstätten. Und wir haben uns immer getroffen zum Trinken und so. Und irgendwann hat er mich gefragt, ob ich nicht mal bei ihm vorbeikommen kann. Ich habe mich gewundert und so, ja, okay, komm mir besuchen. Weil zu dem Zeitpunkt war ich selbst noch, da habe ich selbst mit dem Gedanken gespielt, Steinbildhauerin, ja, also Bildhauerin zu werden. Bin ich da hingegangen in die Werkstätten und dann stand da in Rohgestalt einer der Köpfe aus Friedrichs Mohren-Gruppe, in der wir uns hier gerade befinden. Und er meinte, ja, er bräuchte ein Haarmodel. Er würde gerne meine Haare anfassen und meine Haare betrachten, um die Haare besser, dieser Mohrengruppe besser modellieren zu können. Die wurden damals restauriert.
Das ist ein sehr interessantes Buch von Amrita Sher-Gill. Was ich finde, was ich schätze an Amrita, ist, dass sie hat angefangen, Bilder zu malen von Leuten, die aus ihren Kulturen kommen. Und nicht nur, wie Männer haben sie gezeichnet oder gemalt.
Und in Deutschland habe ich halt die Erfahrung gemacht, dass wenn du anders aussiehst oder anders bist, dass du nicht mehr unbedingt zur Kategorie Mensch gehörst. Also Berlin bedeutet für mich auch eine Form von Erwachen, weil ich in Berlin sehr viele verschiedene Menschen auf engstem Raum kennengelernt habe. Ja, also kannte ich ja auch verschiedene Leute, aber ich war eigentlich immer in so einer homogenen Gesellschaft.
Bueno. Gaby, ¿estás por ahí?
Sí, yo ya estoy.
Natasha. A ver si la vemos.
Ya.
Natasha está acá con nosotros.
Perdón, se volvió a disparar el video, ya está.
Hola.
Thank you, Natasha, for being here. No sé si tienen alguna pregunta, si no voy a empezar yo. Acá está Vera, que nos va a ayudar con la traducción. Vera, ¿estás por ahí? No te veo, ahí estás. Bueno, Natasha, muchas gracias por tu presentación. Yo tenía una pequeña pregunta que me interesa por ahí un poco, que si te puedes explayar un poco en cómo fue el proceso de trasladar o de traducir una tesis doctoral de un contexto tan académico a una obra de teatro, ¿no? Me refiero a Afroculture. Bueno, no sé si Vera, ¿querés traducir eso así y después por ahí agrego otra parte más?
Sí, Natasha, Florencia would like to know how your process was to transfer your PhD thesis to a theater play. How was the process of, so to say, translation from a very theoretical to a more practical at the theater?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was very lucky to have had a residency with the Goethe Institute in Brazil. And during this phase, I was in Salvador de Bahia for 2 months. And this is where the idea grew of how can I translate the work that I do and my identity also to other communities of the diaspora. Yeah. And then the Goethe Institute asked me if I wanted to do a scenic reading. So this is how it started, as translating my texts, first of all, during this residency with the locals also of Bahia, which is the oldest community actually, and the biggest community outside of Africa, biggest Black community outside of Africa. And this is where it started, working with a translator, working with the community, with actors from the community, and then translating my work word for word, which I think only could work because I don't speak Portuguese. And so they had to make their performance understandable for me. I could only see that that my work was being transformed through the art that they were, the style that they were reading, the negotiations that took place during this performance. And I think that this gave the...
sorry, Natasha, sorry that I interrupt you, but Vera has to translate you.
Oh, sorry. sorry.
It's going to be a little complicated then. Thank you, sorry.
I don't know how much you got. Maybe you tell me how much you understood.
Yes. The whole translation or transformation process from a PhD to a theater piece started with a Goethe Institute residency.
Necesitamos en español esto para que la gente...
Ay, perdón.
¿No?
El proceso de traducción y de transformación, de transferencia de la tesis doctoral a una pieza teatral comenzó con una residencia ofrecida por el Goethe Institute en Brasil, que duró 2 meses. Esa fue la primera fase de traducción de mi trabajo. Para mí era importante la traducción de este trabajo de la tesis que reflejara mi identidad y lo que era la diáspora de mi comunidad africana. Comenzó el trabajo trabajando en colaboración con una traductora, porque por supuesto había que traducir del alemán al portugués la obra, el trabajo, y con artistas locales de la ciudad de Salvador de Bahía, que tiene la comunidad más grande africana fuera de África. Para mí, como yo no hablo portugués, básicamente escuchaba su performance y participaba desde afuera por no hablar el idioma y observaba lo que era la transformación, cómo iba cambiando el estilo y una especie de negociación que ocurría para transmitir mi trabajo.
Okay, I don't know, Natasha, I cut you, so maybe you want to follow with the...
I don't know where I stopped, sorry. I got lost.
¿Qué quieres decir vos, Vera?
Yes, and you said that it was sort of like a negotiation, the translation work and the work with the artist, because you didn't speak Portuguese.
It was a creative negotiation, and which the carrying element was also Sana, who was the Afro-Brazilian percussionist. So it was the music that also transported the meaning and connected all of these different approaches to the same topic, actually, because it's Afro culture. It's very translatable in Spanish. It's Afrocultura, no?
Yes, fue una negociación creativa y una parte importante del trabajo de traducción la llevó a cabo, entre otros, un percusionista para transmitir la música y de esa forma comunicar el mensaje de lo que es la cultura africana.
Ok. Acá voy a leer una pregunta de Millie que pregunta, dentro de la estructura universitaria como docente, ¿cómo es la interacción entre la academia y los estudiantes con la politización de problemas que se invisibilizaron, conceptos como el tiempo circular? ¿Hay resistencias y confrontaciones dentro de la universidad?
Student Millie has a question for you, Natasha. She would like to know how the relationship between academia and students are, if this communication is politicized or not, and if there are any confrontations at all within the university as well.
I'm not sure I understand the question 100%, but I will say I can speak from on different experiences that I have in university. And actually, it doesn't matter where I teach, and I've taught in different countries in the world, but it's always the same phenomenon due to the fact that Black bodies are always political, and especially in academic spaces. And so that is the same thing everywhere. I think that why I'm actually at this moment, why I'm in the USA teaching Black German studies and not in Germany teaching Black German studies, is because the resistance movement is just much older, and the institutionalization is more advanced. And in Germany, we don't have Black studies. We don't. It's only since last year that Black German history is even being recognized through the Black Lives Matter movement. Yeah, maybe I stop there for now. Sorry, I keep forgetting that you have to translate.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Natasha dice que no está segura si entendió toda la pregunta, pero dice que a lo largo de su trayectoria académica ha tenido distintas experiencias en diferentes países y universidades, y dice que los cuerpos negros son en sí mismos ya políticos, y ahora mismo está enseñando en Estados Unidos porque dice que allí tienen una trayectoria, una tradición más larga de resistencia, de lucha de resistencia, y por ejemplo en Alemania no hay estudios relacionados a la cultura negra, y entonces está en Estados Unidos presentando lo que es la cultura negra alemana en Estados Unidos.
Mm-hmm. And so the work that I do, my research on Black Germany has literally pushed me into the arts, where Black bodies have been more recognized, especially in Germany now, in a German context. Black bodies have always been recognized in entertainment and sports, yeah, and of course in the arts. Yeah, so that's where a place that I was literally pushed into, and I'm more accepted in the arts sector or in the cultural sector than I am in academia. Yeah, but at the same time, it also supported my research because, as we say, a picture says more than 1,000 words. So dealing with topics like racism and sexism, which are untouchable, it was easier for me to show a picture, to show old historical pictures from ancient German times where Black bodies and Black people were in these pictures, to actually show that we exist, and not to have my written work being discredited and devalued as interpretive and non-factual and non-academic.
Sí, en lo que respecta a la investigación mía sobre la Alemania negra, dice que a través de los cuerpos negros, cuya presencia es más visible en el área de los deportes, de las artes y el entretenimiento, esos tres lugares ayudaron a que pudiese tener más aceptación en el ámbito académico. Y especialmente en el ámbito artístico ha tenido más aceptación. Y como todos sabemos, la frase que dice una imagen tiene más de 1000 palabras. Lo que yo hago para transmitir los temas relacionados al racismo en la actualidad es utilizar imágenes, pinturas, obras antiguas para demostrar que existimos a través de estas obras. Y lo que respecta a mi trabajo académico, lo que quiero es que se acepte la parte, digamos, académica, que no se interprete como no académico.
Bueno, tengo yo una pregunta. Hablaste en términos de presencia de los cuerpos negros en el ámbito de las artes o del deporte, y que eso llevó como a cierta aceptación en el medio académico. De alguna manera seguimos en los procesos endogámicos típicos de la cultura. Lo que quería saber es si sentís de alguna manera que esta práctica compleja que llevas adelante, o podés dar algunos ejemplos de cuando esta práctica tiene una incidencia en el campo de la realidad más concreta del circuito entre académico, artístico o del entretenimiento, del deporte, que es lo que nombraste.
Gabriel's question is, you talked about the presence of Black bodies through arts and sports and how they helped gain more acceptance in the academic sector. He would like to know, to hear about some examples of your work, of how you've obtained more acceptance and more concrete reality through your work, if you can have a couple of examples.
I think what the moment where I became an academic was not by entering the system as a student. And this is the case usually for white people in Germany. When they become a student, they enter the academic system. I was a student, and I remember back then that I was never acknowledged as a student. I was always my presence was always reduced to visiting, to the visitor. And this was the case until I reached my PhD and gained my doctor title by actually working on Black studies, on Afrocultura. This is where the first moment where my work was accepted with my title. So to say, as if it had gained a stamp of proof of reality, correctness. It was with this title, and since then, I think I'm experiencing less that people question my work. But this was a moment that actually changed the perspective of my work. Yes, I have to say that.
Dice que cuando ella era estudiante en la universidad no se la veía como estudiante, no se la aceptaba como estudiante, que eso llevó un tiempo hasta que ella recibiera su título de doctorado, y ahí sí logró mayor aceptación, y aparte del tema de su tesis era la afrocultura, y allí fue cuando sintió ella que fue el primer momento en donde logró como obtener como un sello de aprobación del sector académico, donde lo que decía vos, Gabriel, la realidad aceptaba su existencia, y en donde su trabajo se valoraba y no se cuestionaba.
Bien, y ampliando un poco esto y uniéndolo con la experiencia en Brasil, lo que me preguntaba es si sintió la potencia del cuerpo en escena, valga la redundancia, como más potente que este accionar dentro de la academia. O sea, cuando entra este diálogo con la experiencia artística, si sintió que esa incidencia en el mundo de lo real se potenciaba, además de poetizarse. O si podemos hablar de una poética potenciada, algo así.
He would like to know if apart from your work, in general academic work, if your experience in Brazil, for example, where the body itself had a strong presence on stage, if it helped strengthen your academic work, if your poetic, so to say, work was expanded.
I think that what made the difference in Brazil is that my body is always present, and my academic work
is always present too, especially as a European and as a Black feminist. Theory and practice are two things that are inseparable. But what was new in Brazil is it was homecoming for my soul. And that was a new experience, which I was allowed to have in Brazil, that these three things for the first time were connected to each other. That made the difference.
En lo que respecta a Brasil, yo siento que las dos cosas estaban presentes, tanto mi cuerpo como mi trabajo académico. Y por cierto, yo me considero una feminista negra. Pero lo que sí fue algo nuevo para mí fue la combinación de los tres ámbitos, el cuerpo, lo académico y el alma. Eso fue algo nuevo para mí.
También, quería también, siguiendo con esta experiencia que tuvo en Brasil, quería preguntarle cómo había sido percibido, ¿no? Porque es un contexto tan distinto, ¿no? Si bien son también afrodescendientes, el contexto es tan diferente, ¿no? Brasil de Alemania. Entonces, cómo ella también pensó, por un lado, la adaptación de su tesis, si tuvo también en cuenta todo este contexto tan diferente que, si bien son afrodescendientes, es un territorio tan distinto al alemán, ¿no?
Florencia, I would like to know that, of course, you both share the African ancestry, but the whole adaptation, translation of your work to Brazil, was it any difference because the context was different? You know, to have also in consideration like how the perception of the work would be there?
No, there were differences, and I think the biggest difference was the language, but there were also similarities. And what we have in common is that we are members of the African diaspora. So we're connected in very much more, for example, in the experiences that we have with racism, with systemic violence. So this brings us closer to each other than any language would. So this is what we became. We were family members meeting after a long time. It was a spiritual level, that was one thing, but also not in a national context, but in a diaspora context, we were closer to each other than I could be closer to any white French person, for example, who doesn't come from Germany, if that makes sense.
Bueno, la diferencia más grande obviamente era el idioma, ¿no? El portugués. Pero lo que sí teníamos en común, esa conexión que teníamos en común era de ser ambas partes de la diáspora africana y de sufrir en ambas partes el racismo y la violencia. Y eso fue lo que nos acercó y se sintió como conocer a un miembro de una familia. O sea, eso fue a nivel espiritual la conexión. O sea, teníamos más en común que, por ejemplo, yo lo que tendría en común con una persona blanca francesa.
Muy emocionante eso, y sobre eso, en la conferencia anterior de este mismo ciclo se habló del concepto de identidades marrones o marronas en femenino, y veo tu insistencia en nombrarte feminista negra. Quería, si podías extenderte un poco en las particularidades que tiene un accionar feminista negro en relación, por ahí el feminismo blanco es más fácil de comprender, o tiene más visibilidad. Entonces esta radicalidad de percibirte como feminista negra, y que acabas de decir que encontraste almas muy cercanas en Brasil, bueno, con otros feminismos de otros colores o mezclados como estos marrones que se hizo referencia, si tenés historias para contar en relación a esos cruces de feminismos. ¿Se entiende, Vera? Perdón, fui un poco... Sí.
Sí. Bueno, muy emocionante lo que nos contaste, Natasha, dice Gabriel. Por cierto, en otra de las conferencias...
Ahora al inglés, ahora no. Vera.
Pardon, sorry. Natasha, Gabriel is saying that it was very, very emotional, what you were sharing. And he mentioned another conference they offered about brown identity. And he pointed out how often you've been mentioning the fact that you consider yourself a Black feminist. And he would like to know more about how your actions, your behavior in particular, is seen in Germany, for example, because white feminism has more visibility. So how would you differentiate this? And if there are any, crossovers or any things you share with other feminist movements?
I don't know where to start to answer this question because the answer is really big. Maybe you start with that, with translating. Yeah.
No sé cómo responder a esta pregunta porque la respuesta es muy, muy larga, así que empecemos por ahí.
Okay, so I'll try to break it down. Yeah, let me start this way. I don't know where to. Let me start this way. I'm presently writing another book because that's what I do. I write books. Yeah, and I'm writing a book researching Black feminism in Germany. Yeah, and I'm looking back in time to when I find the first woman who was politically active. That for me is feminism in a nutshell. Yeah.
Bueno, estoy escribiendo e investigando para un nuevo libro, porque eso es lo que yo hago, escribir libros, y para resumirlo, porque sería una respuesta muy larga, este libro en particular estoy investigando el feminismo negro en Alemania. Y para mí el punto de partida que yo escogí es la primera mujer feminista negra activa en Alemania, para empezar.
So I've been looking in the archives, and the oldest Black feminist I found was from the year 1743.
La primera mujer feminista negra activa que encontré en los archivos data del año 1743.
So Black feminism is nothing new. Yeah, I think this is really important. It hasn't entered the white mainstream, of course not, because I think if you look through history also, and you don't even have to look so far back, for the longest part in time, white feminists have been gatekeepers when it comes to politics or women politics in general, yeah, and especially in Germany. Mm-hmm.
Bueno, lo que quería decir con esto del año 1743 es que el feminismo negro no es nada nuevo. Lo que sí no ha ocurrido hasta ahora es que no ha entrado en el mainstream blanco, ¿no? El feminismo negro. Y lo que sigue ocurriendo es que las feministas blancas son las que deciden, ¿no? Por qué se lucha, son las guardianas de los temas estos.
So I'm practically starting where my dissertation ended. In my dissertation, I look at Audrey Lord, for example. Audrey Lord came to Germany in the 1980s. She was invited in a feminist context to come to Germany. And at that time, she was the first Black feminist to criticize the white German feminist movement and to criticize white women for their racism. That was the 1980s. Yeah?
En esta investigación conocí el trabajo de la poetisa Audrey Lord, que vino invitada a Alemania en los 80 y que fue como una de las líderes del feminismo negro, y que fue una de las que empezó a criticar el feminismo blanco, ¿no?
Mm-hmm. And so she came to Germany in the feminist movement, and she ignited the Afro-German movement. So the Afro-German movement, which I am a part of today, was founded in the women's movement. So Black feminist theory and intersectionality is the foundation of our community. Yeah. And Black feminists cannot be taken out of this community. It's the foundation of our community. And this is what differs us, for example, from other European countries, like in England or in France, that are much older communities, older Black communities. They were where Black women and Black feminists have to struggle inside of these communities for their space and their voices to be heard. Our community was founded in the Black feminist movement, so it cannot be separated from that. And I think that this is my political existence. So when I say I'm a Black feminist, I'm marking the political position from where I started moving, even. Yeah, from where I start thinking, from where I start breathing, from where I start believing. This is how foundational Black feminism is in Germany.
La visita de Audrey Lord a Alemania básicamente fue la que disparó el nacimiento del movimiento afro-alemán. O sea, así fue como fue fundado el movimiento feminista, gracias a esta interseccionalidad de feminismos. O sea, nació dentro de la misma comunidad. A diferencia de otros feminismos en Inglaterra, en donde hay una lucha entre voces de distintos feministas. O sea, aquí nació de un movimiento más amplio a uno por ahora más pequeño. Y para mí, siendo feminista negra, significa tener una posición política. Es decir, yo respiro, pienso, escribo como una feminista negra.
Bien, tengo una pregunta acá de Claudia que le pregunta a Natasha, ¿qué consejos nos darías a nosotros como artistas, investigadores latinoamericanos, para llevar a cabo una práctica artística y académica desde una perspectiva antirracista y feminista? Y yo agregaría interseccional.
Natasha, Claudia would like to know if you could give her and the other students any advice of how to be artists and academic students at Natasha in order to put forward and fight against racism and to strengthen feminism, and Florencia adds to help the intersectionality evolve.
No, I can't. No, I can't. And I'm serious. No, I can't. No.
No puedo darles consejos, y lo digo en serio, no puedo.
I think that if I had the solution, there would be no racism. This is really important, that we're always looking for solutions to racism, as if there is a result, if there's something we can hold, something we can materialize, and if we take that screwdriver or that hammer and hammer something or screw something, then racism will go away. No, it doesn't work like that.
Pienso que si yo tuviese la solución, no existiría el racismo. O sea, yo no puedo darles una herramienta como un martillo, por ejemplo, o un destornillador para solucionar o para erradicar el racismo.
Mm-hmm. What I think is really important to understand is that the solution to racism lies in the process of its deconstruction. Because racism is a system that needs to be deconstructed step by step. And this is the only way that we can move forward. Yeah? So, okay, maybe you want to translate that first.
Tal vez parte de la solución sería comprender el racismo, es decir, atravesar un proceso de deconstrucción para poder avanzar.
So if you're asking me how to use your work to deconstruct racism, I think that is a different question. Yeah, that I think that you have to first of all understand, especially when it comes to art, you have to understand the social context of art, your own social context in which you are producing art. Yeah, like my social context is Black feminism. I put this out very clearly. And even if I did not, this is what my film shows, then still art from Black women is seen as political. Yeah.
Una forma de deconstruir el racismo a través de mi trabajo, por ejemplo, sería comprender el contexto social en donde se producen estas expresiones artísticas. En mi caso, como feminista negra, soy consciente del contexto donde yo vengo y eso es importante, conocer el contexto donde uno produce el arte, la obra de arte. Y por otro lado, al mismo tiempo, también se sigue considerando político al arte negro. Siempre se lo considera político.
And if you are the artist, then I think there is more for you to understand than that is between you, your paintbrush, and your paint. And this is especially how art is taught in a Eurocentric context, that it's about the paint and the brush, yeah? And maybe the result of what comes out of it. But you yourself, even holding a paintbrush, yeah, becomes part of the art that you create. And I think this is really a different approach to art, and that everybody who creates art, and art, I have a broad understanding of art. I don't only mean painting. Yeah, for me, writing is a form of art. Yeah, speaking is a form of art. Audiovisual is a form of art. So whenever we create, whenever we produce, yeah, we're already in a social political context doing what we're doing. There is no such thing as a neutral position, and there is also no such thing as free art or the freedom of art. Yeah, maybe something that we wish for, that we gain to have, but I think that is something that we also need to strive for. It's more a goal than something that we have. And this is also my critique on white cis male artists who think that just because they have a name that their art is considered art. Yes, among other men, it's considered art because they defined art among themselves. So I think we really have to redefine what art is. We also have to redefine what aesthetics is. We have to always, as an artist, include yourself in the social context that you are, even have the privilege or not to create art. So there's a lot more to it than just the paint and the brush.
Para empezar, si uno es artista, es muy importante entender la relación entre el pincel y el lienzo. Un artista es parte de esa obra de arte también, porque se tiene en cuenta el contexto social. Yo veo al arte como una forma de expresión amplia, es decir, las expresiones artísticas pueden ser tanto una pintura como un libro, como el lenguaje oral, algo audiovisual. Para mí eso siempre está relacionado con un acto social y político. Por otro lado también, nunca se puede tener una posición neutral. No existe el arte libre por sí mismo. Es algo que deseamos, es un objetivo, pero es algo ideal. Por último, los hombres blancos artistas que tienen un renombre, ellos mismos son los que definen el arte. Y yo pienso que habría que redefinir lo que es el arte y la estética. Es decir, ser un artista es ser una persona privilegiada.
Bueno, una pregunta más, última y para cerrar, y por el placer de escucharte hablar, Natasha, porque de alguna manera lo que voy a preguntar atravesó toda la conferencia. Pero, ¿qué tenés para decir sobre el feminismo negro como herramienta de construcción del racismo? Como para darle un cierre a esto.
Natasha, Gabriel says it's a pleasure to listen to you. And lastly, he would like to know how Black feminism can be used as a tool against racism.
I think Black feminism is intersectional feminism, and intersectionality is a lens through which racist structures have become visible. Yeah, and so in this context, I think that Black feminism, the major use that it has is actually or what we do and what we do best is to make things visible, like structural disadvantage and structural discrimination. That's what Black feminism does. Intersectionality is the product of Black feminism. Yes. So, and I think what we need to aim for is intersectional justice.
La interseccionalidad es el producto del feminismo negro, y lo que hacemos a través de nuestro trabajo en el feminismo negro es hacer visibles las estructuras racistas. Es decir, hacemos visible las desventajas que tenemos y la discriminación que sufrimos. La interseccionalidad, vuelvo a decir, es un producto del feminismo negro, y nuestro objetivo es expandir la interseccionalidad.
Bueno, Natasha, fue un placer tenerte con nosotros. Les agradecemos a todos los que estuvieron participando, no solo de esta conferencia, sino también de las otras dos que hemos tenido en este ciclo, que esperemos se repita en otras oportunidades. Gracias, Natasha, un placer enorme, y bueno, les saludamos a todos y les agradecemos por haber estado acá.
Muchas gracias, esperemos que Vera la despida a Natasha, si traduce, y cerramos.
Thank you.
Natasha, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure listening to you, and thank you also to all the students and participants. Hope to hear from you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this invitation. And for me, it's really the very first time speaking to Argentina, so I'm sending my love.
Muchas gracias por la invitación, fue un placer. Esta es la primera invitación que recibo para hablar en la Argentina, y espero que vengan más invitaciones. Y les mando muchos cariños desde Estados Unidos. From the US?
From the US. From the bottom of my heart.
Desde el fondo de mi corazón. Saludos. Gracias.
Gracias.
Bye.